First off, I'm pleased that there are two Greens in the room, Professor. Well, at least
more than that.
At least two. A couple comments. I support online voting. The last election, federal election, cost $375.8 million. You can do an online election for a tenth of that, highly secure. When we talk about proportionality or those kind of things, reflecting, I think it's important to get as many people out to vote. Mandatory voting I support, with one add-on. Put none of the above on the ballot. People won't spoil it then. And if that is an indication of what people believe and their cynicism about the system, I don't know what might be. Because the cynicism of their system is, in the last federal election, Elizabeth May got more votes and a higher turnout than anybody else in the country. She got 40% of the vote, of the eligible vote. 60% of the people didn't vote for her. Our MP in the room was right about the middle. 30% of the eligible vote voted for you. 70% didn't. How do you correct that with a new electoral reform? But let me get to the real, how does electoral reform affect the way candidates are selected? Let me give you a concrete example. Greens, we had a couple phone calls, couldn't find anybody. We had a paper candidate. It was disappointing, to say the least. The NDP had a meeting of 8 people. Congratulations. Oh, okay, I'll do it if nobody else will. That's how they selected their candidate. The Conservative was an incumbent. And the Liberal was selected at the very last minute by hundreds and hundreds of bussed-in new Liberals. No, that's right. Right next door. How would electoral reform solve that problem, where you have literally, if the NDP had won, 8 people deciding who the candidate is? It wouldn't solve it.
It's not a panacea.
No, I understand that.
It wouldn't do it. It wouldn't help that.
But why are we just focused on the voting system? And maybe that's the first step. But our whole system needs a revisit. Last thing I want to say. Let me pick something. This gentleman here. For every person that voted of his age, somebody tell me how many people my age voted. 3 to 4. 3 to 4 people over 60 voted for every person who was under 30. So guess what the agenda is? My agenda. Healthcare, seniors issues. It's not jobs, it's not economy. So you need to get more of your friends not to vote. My last comment.
Just on that last point, it's not only that this gentleman,
Could you use the mic, please, Peter?
his generation don't vote in large numbers. The studies by Paul Howe and Howard Milner, they both have books out, show that that cadre, as they call it, continue low voting on into their 30s. It isn't, I mean, they don't vote when they're from 18 to 25, but then the 25 to 30 vote is a way down. And it looks like it's not just that one cadre for one little burst don't vote. They simply are turned off generally as they're going through life.
If I could just counter that, Peter. Sure. All these studies were done for Elections Canada in the 90s, and what they were saying is that young people, like you say, if they don't vote when they're young, as older people die off, these people who were young, as they become middle-aged and get older, are also not voting. So voter turnout will continue to drop. But that didn't happen in the last election. And voter turnout in this last election went up more among young people than any other group. That's one of the reasons Trudeau won. And as for the agenda being driven just by what older people want, I also reject that. He's got a youth council now. He was the critic on youth. He is a relatively young prime minister. I think he cares about what young people want, and marijuana is one of the issues that's a big thing, and it's not because people over 60 are demanding it. So, you know, I hear what you say, and there's a lot to it. And older people do vote at a higher level and all of that, but it's not as if what we've seen is, it's not unidirectional, that it'll go up and down. The other thing I would say about young people is I think young people are as much involved in political activities as ever, if not more. But they don't see it, the best expression through political parties. They belong to the Sierra Club or some other public interest group, or they're doing volunteer work. I think probably more than ever, because they think that is actually changing things more effectively than our political system. But they're doing politics their way.
Should we go through the questions? Please.
I think that's all. So it's been brought up, but I want to emphasize again that there should be an accountability between the candidate and the party. Say, if I like Mr. Ehsassi, but I don't like the Liberal Party, right now my vote for Mr. Ehsassi means that I vote for the Liberal Party. It should be a separate one. Or if I like the Liberal Party, but I don't like Mr. Ehsassi, I should be able to vote for another candidate, a Liberal candidate. Or I like the Liberal Party, but there may be an NDP candidate that I like more personally, even though I disagree with their party, that I should be able to vote for that candidate separately. So whatever the electoral reform, that electoral system that want to be used, please put that in mind. Thank you.
I'd like to start with the observation that if you've got an important issue, you have to make sure you ask the right questions. So when you come to online voting, it isn't the question, should we have online voting? The question should be, can a voter be confident that an online vote will be cast and be no less legitimate than a paper ballot, right? That's the question you have to ask and answer. And that's an askable and answerable question, even though it's a little more mouthy than oh, should we have online voting or not? But I'd like to extend that to the point that the fellow ahead of me made about process. I think that no matter what happens, there will be an outcome that will get us representatives elected and governments formed, right? That's going to happen either by retaining the existing system or switching to a new one. So I'm not as concerned about the outcome as, in fact, the process that gets us there. Because the worst thing that can happen is if we discover and institute the best system in the world for us, and everybody hates it because of the process by which we got there. So that would decrease voter engagement, people would become more cynical. My question to the panel is, do you perceive that as a real risk that, in fact, the process by which, and I gotta tell you, just listening to your comments, they were almost uniformly focused on the negative. First past the post is crappy, referendums are crappy. Like, it's hard to vote on it's hard to advocate for the merits of these things because people focus on the flaws. So my question is, to what extent do you think there's a risk that we will end up with a tainted outcome even if the outcome is good?
Alright, so I have one comment and two comments basically. First of all, about the scrutiny and the length of process that would be added to voting system when we change it, for example, to ranking system. I would say an example would be municipal elections of Toronto, which are done with a Scantron sheets as every exam on university or I don't know, a college or a high school, and there are way more advanced technologies than that. I remember I casted my ballot for municipal election. I went back home. 5 minutes later, the whole election results were out. So it didn't really take that long because they used the computer. So it's not that big of a deal. Don't be scared of the technology. Secondly would be the relationship with the MP. In answer to your comments about clustering, because I come from a city with a clustering system, and now I live in Toronto with a one-on-one system, And back in my original city, my hometown, there are 30 members of parliament for 12 million people. Good luck getting in line to get to talk to him. Whereas with Ali, I knew him 2 years or 1 year before election because he was advocating for the election. He was going door to door talking to people, and I wanted to vote green. My heart is green, has always been green. But if I have a choice, I'll always vote for Ali because he's a great MP. He listens to me. Honestly, no, I'm just telling the truth because he is easy to talk. He's easy to get in touch with. He listens to constituents, and but that brings me to the last comment. That would be he's a backbencher now. So as long as he listens to everyone, as long as he has great ideas, as long as I agree with him, he can't do, well, I don't know, but I don't see him doing much. Well, he does as much as a big backbencher can do, but the system doesn't let him do anything. And whenever I watch Parliament, I just get depressed because it's like blues against reds, reds against orange, and they're always attacking each other. There's never one conversation that is productive. There's never any progress there. They can just sit at home and they say, okay, you vote for Trudeau or Harper or whoever, and he will be the next dictator for the next 4 years, because that's how it works. Because if you have a majority parliament, if all parliament does is attacking each other, it's just one person deciding for everyone, and you're just choosing the dictator for the next 4 years. Thank you.
It's already been pointed out that minorities would be better represented with proportional representation. But I think it's important to note that until this past election, women have only been represented in Parliament approximately between 22 and 25%, where in countries with proportional representation, the numbers are more between 42 and 45%. So women almost get double the representation, and they are an important part of our community. It's been mentioned as well that here in Toronto there's 25 ridings, 30% or more people are conservatives, but they have no representation at all. It doesn't seem democratic to me. I was very pleased to see that the panel has been very supportive in all their comments on proportional representation. Trudeau, he brought in the idea that it's the last election with first past the post, but he also said that every vote should count. And the only way every vote can count is if we have proportional representation. I have some postcards up on the desk out in the lobby, and you can fill it out, and it's already addressed and postage paid to the Electoral Reform Committee. You put your name on it, and it's supportive of proportional representation. They're the ones who are going to make the decision on how the electoral system is going to be running. Thank you.
First, I would like to thank you for making this forum possible and
I can't hear you.
possible for us. I would like to thank everybody for this forum and making it possible to give our comments or make questions. My question is not very relevant to the voting system, but perhaps mostly to the parliament. I would like to ask why things are so slow, move so slow in the parliament, and in Canada in general. Of course, except the home prices, which go fast, moving up very fast. In every elections, these slogans are usually, it's time for a change. But in the end, we don't see any changes, true changes. The slogan is, for example, rectifying all the immigration enactments that Carter's taken place overnight, and it's been a year that we don't see any real changes. And nothing has happened.
So we can talk about that. Could you just focus it on electoral?
Electoral? No. Well, on electoral, I really cannot make any comment, but I don't have any questions, valid questions, because I believe this is something which needs to be studied more and to have a more knowledgeable views on giving
any comments or asking any questions. Thank you very much.
So a number of times it's been mentioned tonight that most of the power in Parliament is held by the Cabinet. Backbenchers generally vote with the party. Everyone generally votes with the party. And that allowing members of Parliament to allowing a free vote might add more diversity to the representation there. It seems like list proportional and mixed member proportional systems really do entrench the power of the party as a unit and really bake it into the system in a way that parties aren't systematic right now. It seems to me like STV encourages, I guess, competition in a way between MPs instead of just between parties. That seems like a good idea to me. I'm wondering if the panel thinks there's any benefit to focusing more on the party itself as opposed to MPs.
Good evening.
There's been certainly a few comments talking about the process, and maybe it's important for us to trust the process in order for us to accept the outcomes of that. Certainly, the panel's been very vocal about their dislike for the referendum or method for selecting, but the panel's also talked about how the cabinet has the ultimate power in the parliament. So I just kind of would love to hear why, how concentrating the power of a few elected leaders who would manipulate our House of Commons party, or would be a better solution to this process. Thank you.
I just have a couple of concerns. With electoral reform, we're talking a lot about ensuring that the views of the people are being reflected in their government and that we are being actually represented and our views are being represented. But one of the things I wanted to point out was that often there's one issue or two issues that really decide where the votes go. And although I have a myriad of different views on different issues across the board, my views aren't represented by the people that I vote for, the party that I vote for. And so it's because we vote for platforms. And I was wondering if any of the new systems that we've been talking about sort of address that issue and allow maybe the diversity of parties, the diversity of MPs, can finally give voters someone representing them that actually does share more than one of their views or most of their views, and whether or not that would actually increase trust. It's the same sort of idea with omnibus bills. You don't vote for them, you don't want to vote for them because you don't like half the things in them, but you have to because it's one issue. The other thing I wanted to bring up probably isn't very popular, I'm not sure if it's relevant, but I know that when our country was formed, there was, even before it was Canada, there was an effort put in place to make sure that the maritime provinces had a say in the government, even though they had a say that was greater than their population. And I'm wondering if the move towards absolute proportional representation reduces the importance of those local voices. So even though the Maritimes have a lower population, is it still important to hear their voice?
We have 3 more.
Just a quick interruption. We only have this room for another 10 minutes. So if we could try to get the last questions as briefly as possible so that the panel still has an opportunity to answer them. Thanks.
Good evening. I've got a few concerns and comments and a question as well. First concern is I'm really questioning this 18-month timetable that we have to deal with this issue. It seems to me very arbitrary. It was made in the election campaign as the way to have this issue come about. But to me, the heart of getting people engaged is getting them to understand what these various options are. And as we saw tonight, we really did short shrift to really trying to understand. We thrown around a lot of terms like MMP and STB and so on. I'm not sure how many people in this audience and the larger public really know what we're talking about. And so that educated piece, I think, is critical. People are going to be informed to go into whether it's a referendum or another election. And I think more thought needs to be given, and this 18-month time frame fits into that, which is that we need to have a more thoughtful look at how we engage people, which gets me to my second point. If we only have 3% of the public that's actually interested in this issue, which is one of the statistics that was given tonight, how do we engage that, maybe not other 97%, but certainly a larger number than the 3%? Because then it becomes a very, I think, elitist type of issue that very few people are really concerned about, and yet has dramatic ramifications in terms of how we govern ourselves. And the point about youth being interested in things like the Sierra Club and so on, I agree. I think they have chosen very specific things to put their energy into in terms of being advocates, and it's not politics, it's not the political system that we're talking about tonight. I think there's huge cynicism and skepticism about politics, about politicians. We don't have to look south of the border to see that in grander scale, but I think it exists here as well. Where people, certainly younger people, feel like their vote doesn't really count for anything, why bother? So how do we engage the citizenry, but especially young people? Because if they're not going to vote when they're younger, as was said already, then we're leading down a path where the percentage of people voting is only going to decrease. I think it's an aberration, actually, what's happened in this election with Trudeau. I think he had star power. I think he appealed to youth. I think if Trudeau was not that person in the Liberal Party, I don't think we would have had 68 or 69% this year. The trend line has been for many, many elections that voter turnout is less and less and less, and I see that continuing in the future. Trudeau, I do think, is just really an aberration. I hope he's not, but my sense is he was. So I think we really need to understand how we can engage other people. The other thing I want to comment on is that I think we have this idea that somehow we have to come up with a solution that, or an option that people will buy into, and then we have this new option, just like we had first past the post for 149 years. Somehow we've got to come up with this option, be it MNP or SDV or AV or PR, whatever it is, and that somehow that's our new system. And I think we might want to view this in a slightly different way. I was in New Zealand, I was living in New Zealand, and they have MNP, and they've had it for a number of elections now. And when I was there was actually a consultation to go back and review and revisit their MNP system, because there were many people in New Zealand that did not like the split two-tier system, where you vote for an MP and you have a party list. And the comments that I kept on hearing was that the people who are on the party list are not legitimate MPs. They haven't been voted in by the people, and therefore don't have the credibility of people that were actually voted in directly as MPs. What they were doing in New Zealand, I think it's worthwhile to consider that option, is to say, hey, it's not fixed. We can change our electoral system. So if we decide in the next 18 months, before the next election or after the next election, that we have a system, let it run for an election or two and do a revisit afterwards. And I think we position it in a way at the front end that this isn't carved in stone. We don't know. We don't know what the unintended consequences will be of anything we decide. So why can't we go forward with our best thinking at this time, see what happens after an election or two, and see if there is a desire to maybe tweak it to make it work better in a Canadian context. So don't really have, well, the only question I would really have there is what your thoughts would be on how to engage the citizenry more, especially with young people.
My question is actually for Mr. Ehsassi. You represent